All right.
The East Nashville podcast, back with DJ Tim Hibbs. How you doing, Tim?
Hey, Chris, I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm glad you're here.
Well, I'm glad to be here in this wonderful house. I was checking out your guitars.
Yeah.
I've also got to ask you about some of your amps and your amp cabinets there.
I'd be happy to.
Also, I notice a paltry lack of LPs. You've got some, but
Yeah.
where are the rest of them?
Oh, my vinyl collection is nothing like yours. I have a few very choice pieces. When you said LPs, I was thinking Les Pauls.
Ooh,
And I was like, I have no Les Pauls.
You don't, because as you told me before we started, you are a Strat nerd.
Yes, I wouldn't even call myself a Strat nerd because that implies you know something about Strats. I really don't. I just have this selection of Strats that I really like, that feel good under my hands, and I'm just like, well, nothing else works as good as this. So
At this point, I should probably say that I moved here to work for Gibson Guitars.
oh no.
So we'll let that slide.
Okay. Let's start there. How did you end up part of the East Nashville scene? I know your whole life has pretty much been musical.
It has.
At least adjacent to music at every
Yeah,
point.
no, it has. I many years ago moved to Dallas thinking I was going to law school. And literally the day I moved, my mom got really sick. So I was thinking, well, maybe now's not the time to spend a lot of money for law school. So I thought, well, I'll find a job for a year and then go. So I walked into a record store at that point, the Sound Warehouse at Lovers and Greenville Lane in Dallas. Said, can I have a job? And they said, can you start today? So I did that. I was an assistant manager. Then I got my own store after a year. And then very soon after that, I moved into the buying department for the chain. And it was a big chain. It was, at that point, about 150 stores. They were very much like tower stores, very large, deep catalog. We also had video. And really enjoyed my time there. Then I went to work for RCA Records, first in there in Dallas, then moved to Atlanta, then moved to New York. And I moved to New York. We moved to New York January 2001, just in time for the music business to totally go into a tailspin.
Yeah.
Because 2000 was the biggest year ever for music sales, for like hard copy music sales,
Yeah.
CDs, tapes, all that. And with the introduction of Napster, it just all started coming down. And the music business did an absolutely horrible job of trying to deal with Napster. It took iTunes and Apple to figure out how you actually sell downloads. But anyway, everything was kind of in a tumult at that point. So I worked for a succession of labels. After RCA, I worked for V2, which I loved. We had the White Stripes, we had Moby. And then V2 in America goes out of business. And then I go to work for another label that was distributed by EMI. And they're great. And we have Cheap Trick. We have all these great bands. They go out of business. And then I'll go to work for another label. And I thought, well, I don't know how many times I can keep pulling the rabbit out of the hat here. So I started thinking, well, where would we like to go? Because New York, of course, is a very expensive place to be.
I spent
Particularly
6
if
years
you don't have a job. So, we'd always loved Nashville. My parents are both from Kentucky. When we lived in Atlanta, I was here all the time. So I thought, well, let's reach out. And actually, a friend of mine that I went to college with, Ron Whitler, helped me connect to somebody at Gibson. And we started talking. And we'd have a conversation, and then weeks would go by, and I'd send an email saying, are we still talking? Oh, yes. And so eventually I did, I don't know, at least half a dozen phone interviews with them, and just didn't know where that was going until one day Polly called and said, hey, these guys from Gibson called, and they want to offer you a job. And it's like,
Hey, that's great.
okay, I never met them, but so they moved us here, and I had a job called Business Development Manager, which basically meant I was a salesman for independent stores. So I did the Southeast and, traveled around and loved it. I still have a lot of friends that run great guitar stores, but that's basically how we got to Nashville.
Cool.
And then with Derek, I met Derek in Austin, actually, of all places.
Really?
It was a South by Southwest, And I had known Grant Johnson, who at that point was Derek's guitar player.
Okay.
And I knew Grant because I had met him at the flea market, not the flea market, the farmer's market in Nashville, because I recognized him. He was in a band in Seattle called the Model Rockets,
Okay.
which were they were this amazing power pop band. And it's like I was watching him play in this country band. I go, were you in this? And so, yes, he was. And then we just happened to be walking on the street in Austin during South by Southwest, and he was there. He says, oh, you should meet Derek. And, Derek and I hit it off really quickly, and we continued to talk. And then Derek asked me, he was having a birthday party. He was having it at the Groove
Okay.
there on Calvin Avenue in East Nashville. And he said, would you mind coming and maybe DJing? Because he knew that I liked records. I go, sure, I can do that. And so I did that. We had a lot of fun that day. And then he said, you know what? I'm doing this $2 Tuesday thing, and maybe you want to bring some records there. We could see what would happen. And I'd been to a few $2 Tuesdays, so I knew what he was doing. And sure.
Awesome.
And the first ones we did. I mean, now they've got that old B3 cabinet that they use for the DJ stand.
It was great.
But before that, there was a very rickety table that
So good for a record player.
Exactly. Yes. That we'd set up and hope that it would stay. And in fact, it was kind of one of those that dipped down, so it was hard to get the tables level. Anyway, we did it, and I know I did it at least for 10 years because right about the time that Derek told me he was thinking about ending the series,
Yep.
one of those Facebook memories popped up from 10 years ago.
Wow.
And it showed me, and it's like, okay, that was not too long after I started, but that wasn't the very first time. So,
Yeah.
I did it at least 10 years. I know he's probably done it 12 years or so. But
I think that's kind of the number him and I settled on
Yeah,
while we were talking
yeah.
about it. It's crazy because I've been going for about 9.5. Because before I moved was my first $2 Tuesday. I was visiting Nashville. I had been here a bunch of times in the early 2000s, and the East Nashville thing wasn't really a thing in like 2002, 2004, or at least it didn't get to my radar.
Right.
So there was a bar on 2nd Avenue way back then. I almost think it was called Rock Bar or Rock and Roll Bar. It was just off of Broadway, and it was where you could play in a rock band.
Okay.
So we would come, because I'm not a country singer. So me and my acoustic rock band or my electric rock band or whatever, we would come down and play just off of Broadway. And back then, I would swear Broadway closed down at like 11 or 12.
I don't know. When I was coming over to Nashville, especially from Atlanta, that's right when BR549 started, and they were signed to Arista. I was working for RCA, which both of those were within the BMG distribution system.
Sure.
So, I had a kind of bird's eye view of what was going on down there, and I went to Roberts. I went to 328 Performance Hall. Went to 12th and Porter, and also
Oh, man. That was a great venue.
and 3rd and Lindsley. Went to Slow Bar, but there weren't a lot of other places at that point.
Yeah, I remember my experience of Nashville in those early 2000s was it was kind of sleepy. And, coming from the Northeast, it felt kind of podunk to me. That I was like, oh, I don't know about this place.
Well, things were happening. The restaurant scene was starting to wake up. There was a restaurant there in West Nashville, The Boundary,
Okay.
that was like the place. And that's where, especially a lot of the Music Row people hung out, and it was great food. And you could feel like a food scene starting to develop there.
Yeah.
Of course, the Music Row scene had always been happening,
Yeah.
and I was familiar with that just tangentially. I didn't work RCA Nashville Records, but I knew the people that worked at RCA there, so I was very familiar with what was going on.
Cool. What was your role in all these music labels?
Well, I did sales and marketing.
Okay.
I with RCA, it was regional label director was the term. So I dealt in physical product, which as I say, in 2001, suddenly started going away. But I would sell to the big accounts in my territory, and I had some big ones. Anderson Merchandisers in Amarillo, which put the music in most of the WalMarts, which meant that they were pretty much the biggest account in the country.
Yep.
And then I also dealt with a lot of indie stores, and I happened to have the Coalition of Independent Music Stores, SIMS, was founded there in Birmingham, Alabama, and collected all of the, well, not all, but most of the big independent stores in the country so that they could kind of be like a chain
Yeah.
in dealing with that and
Basically, to have more
clout.
Yeah.
And, and so many great stores that I dealt with through that. So, yeah, it was fun. I mean, I would go and set up in stores. And we were talking about Louisville before we started. And my good friend John Timmons, who had a store called Ear Ecstasy there, which I just loved. And one of the bands on RCA was Foo Fighters. And we had them, they were playing Atlanta one time. And after the show, Gus Brandt, the tour manager, and Dave came over and said, look, we've got this idea. We want to do an independent store on Independence Day. We think we should do like a big show, a concert. So I pulled up their tour list. I go, this couldn't have worked out better. You're in Louisville on July 4th.
Cool.
So I called John, and he immediately just went to town. He got the barbecue restaurant next door to give away 1,000 meals that day. They shut down the block. We had, I don't know how many hundred people we had in the store, but we had at least that many outside looking in. And the band played live in the store, sort of acoustic. But yeah, that was the kind of thing that I would do. And that was such a great day. I bought the band all Louisville Sluggers with their names on them. And my dad got to come. He's passed away now, but he was always a huge fan of music and big Foo Fighters fan, so he got to come. And we were talking about bourbon rules earlier.
Yep.
And on the Foo Fighters rider, they always requested a bottle of Crown Royal. And my friend John Timmons refused on principle to provide Canadian whiskey to them.
I'm with him on this.
So he substituted a much better Kentucky bourbon for them. So
Do you remember which one?
I don't, unfortunately.
That's okay.
But yeah, I was running around like a madman because John had moved like all the racks out of his store to accommodate all the people. And of course, we were doing all the last minute details. My dad, meanwhile, is sitting back there with Foo Fighters and they're drinking bourbon. And I realized I just left a band with baseball bats and unlimited bourbon.
And your dad.
Yeah, but fortunately, the Foo Fighters weren't that kind of band. They weren't going to destroy anything. But yeah, doing events like that, it was just a great run for RCA. When I started with RCA in '94, they were really at the bottom of the label thing. But Joe Galante, who had temporarily gone to New York to be head of RCA overall, had signed Dave Matthews Band, and then he came back to Nashville. But with Dave Matthews Band, that first album, What Would You Say? Everything hit.
Yep.
And it's just all about momentum. Through Dave Matthews Band, they were able to sign other bands like the Verve Pipe from Michigan.
I remember that single, yeah.
And
they had a few good songs, the Verve Pipe.
Yeah. And then some other things started happening. Some of the European signings, like NSYNC was signed to RCA in Europe, not the U.S.
Really?
But, we got them here, and then Robin and Christina Aguilera came along after that. So there was just like a lot of great rock bands, a lot of pop, and it was a really good time for RCA. So
that's really cool.
I truly enjoyed that. And then I got a promotion to go to New York to be senior director of catalog, since I always loved catalog. And got up there just in time for both the merger between Sony and BMG, and then all the tumult like that we talked about with with Napster coming on thing.
It's so funny. Like Metallica got so demonized in the media and by the public, and they weren't the right people as these multimillionaires to be speaking out against peer-to-peer sharing. It just wasn't the right look, but they were clearly right.
Yeah,
'Cause
you
it's
know,
just
I
gotten-
would say Lars was very heavy-handed
Yes.
in his pronouncement. But yeah, you know, it's a thing where all of us, you know, from time immemorial, you had paid for music. And then all of a sudden, in late 2000, this thing came along where, wait a minute, we can get it for free.
Yeah.
And, you know, the thing is, how do you compete with free? And the record labels decided that they would just sue Napster into oblivion.
Yeah.
And they did. But the thing was, 1,000 copycats
It was
popped
bigger
up.
than them.
And, you know, it was, they weren't dealing with kind of the root thing, which was, you know, how do we sell downloads? How do we
Yeah.
make this sexy? And, you know, it took iTunes to do that. And of course, now it's streaming. You know,
Yeah.
most people, I would think, probably don't buy physical copies of anything. And, you know, thank God that vinyl has come back. I mean, vinyl just had its biggest year this past year. It outsold CDs for the
Yeah.
first time ever. But it's never going to replace what it had once been, you know.
Yeah, vinyl. I mean, other than the people who really are dedicated to listening to vinyl, I think a lot of it is fetish property, right? Like you have this band you really like, or you
Yeah.
go out and see a band that you really like, and the temptation to buy a CD is minimal because when are you going to play that CD? You're probably going to listen to the band on Spotify or on Apple Music or something like that. But something like a vinyl record is it's like a nice memento, and it's something special that when you have some friends over, you play the vinyl.
Yeah. You know, I would say that's definitely true for some people. I would hope that.
It's definitely not true for you. We know this.
Oh no, you know, but I would hope it's those people buy those records. Hopefully, they listen to them and then enjoy them, and you know, realize. I mean, listening to a vinyl record is very much a ritual. You have to place it on the turntable. You have to place the tone arm down. I mean, it's very tactile.
Yeah. And you don't have, I mean, you can lift the needle up, but you don't have that ability to start and stop easily the way you do with a CD or the way you do with Spotify.
Yeah.
So it's like we're sitting down and we're going to listen to this record. And it's a deliberate act, which makes
it is. Again,
it makes the experience of the recording all that much better.
you're involved. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're involving your sense of touch and sight and all of that,
Yeah.
and even smell if it's a brand new album. It's got that new album smell. You know, you're more into it than just a click or a stream.
Yeah.
And you know, I definitely think that's part of it. Yeah, for me, I've always from being born, I was a vinyl guy because my dad was a record collector.
Really?
And I just grew up. I didn't know other kids didn't have a whole cabinet full of records and stuff. I mean, my dad was always into that. In fact, as I said, he was from Kentucky. He was from a little town called Vine Grove, Kentucky. It's a little over 2 hours from here. And he and his friends would come to Nashville all the time to buy records from both Ernie's record shop and Randy's Record Mart. And, you know, they would make a weekend of it, come down. They sometimes went to the Grand Ole Opry, and they'd go home with a load of records. But what was really interesting is my dad's collection was very eclectic. I mean, you know, Hank Williams and James Brown, it was just all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Because they had... here in Nashville, WSM, of course, home of the Grand Ole Opry, huge country station. But you also had WLAC, which at the time was one of the biggest R&B stations in the country. And so they were getting both of those. And then, you know, in the presets in his car, he also had, you know, Chicago and Cincinnati and some other stations. So they got this really wide range of music coming out of them. And I think that's really special for this part of the country. Especially WLAC. That was his favorite station. WLAC was a favorite station of Bob Dylan. You know, when he first came to Nashville, he wanted to see the station. Also, Bob Marley was listening in Jamaica. It reached that far.
Wow, really?
Yeah, they were like a 50,000 watt clear channel station at that point. So it would hit most of the country and out into the Caribbean.
Wow.
So, you know, Nashville had a really outsized influence not only in country, which everybody knows, but also in R&B. So, you know, my dad just collected all the records, and I kind of like started taking over the collection. And, you know, we were a military family, and usually we would move like every 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
and you'd have to get rid of a lot of stuff when you moved. But my dad never got rid of the records. It was always, nope, those come with us, which was part of the heaviest stuff that we had.
Yeah.
I don't have the T-shirts I had in high school, but we still had all the records. So anyway, that's where I got into it. And as I say, then when I became a buyer for Sound Warehouse, of course, that continued.
Yeah.
Now, that was during the great CD scare, as I call it, when I'll never forget the day that one of the major labels came in and said, we're going to stop making vinyl. And I kind of looked at our chart. I said, well, that's 30% of your sales. You're really ready to just write that off? And it's, we'll make that up on cassette and CD. And I don't know. I don't know that they... I guess maybe with CD they did for a while, but
cassette is such an interesting one because you can see the appeal of it before CD.
Oh yeah, no, it was convenience.
Yeah, but the sound is terrible.
Well, cassettes actually sound, to me, they sound much better than they have a right to, because you've got a 1/4-inch piece of tape that has to be divided into 4 parts because you have stereo tracks, two sides of stereo tracks.
Yep.
And that it could sound as good as it did was kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Now, I was very much a cassette guy, making my own compilations at home, because my dad always taught me.
Making the mixtapes.
My dad was a reel-to-reel guy, and he always recorded the albums onto reel-to-reel first, and then would file the albums away. And if the tape ever wore out, then you make another tape. But he always taught me, you got to treat that the prime copy well. And as a little kid, I learned how to pick the records up by the side, never touch the records. You set the tone arm down gently. You do all of that, and so that was, again, just from birth. I remember that. And
you were born into this role.
And he was, as I say, he was military. He did 2 tours in Vietnam, and whenever they would come back from Vietnam, they would go through Hong Kong and buy all the latest stereo gear.
Cool.
So he was also a real hi-fi guy. And I got all the hand-me-downs, which, at the time I thought, here, hand-me-downs. But I didn't realize that I was getting all these, like I had a dual turntable and I had this great Sansui receiver, these great speakers. I was getting all his cast-offs, which were very high-quality things.
Yeah.
So...
Hong Kong has always really had that hi-fi scene.
Yeah. And, it's odd how we spent decades pursuing better and better fidelity, only just to throw it away when you can have 1,000 songs in your pocket. And of course now unlimited songs streaming. But when that's why I love playing records through a PA, because they just sound so much better. Listening to a record play through a PA versus a stream, you can tell instantly.
Yes.
When we're at the 5 spot and they switch from the iPad stream to the records, instantly I can tell that. So definitely. There's just nothing like it for me.
Yeah, that's funny, because one of the things I was most excited to ask you about is when did the record collecting start? But that's a cooler answer than I anticipated.
Yeah,
so this is a lifelong thing.
Always been there, and I never got rid of the vinyl. A lot of people during the CD era.
Yeah.
Just, they dumped them all. I was the guy who was like, you just dumped all those? I'm buying that. In fact, we got robbed when we lived in Dallas, and they took all of the CDs. At that point, I had, several thousand CDs.
Yeah.
They didn't steal any of the albums. In fact, they didn't even steal the CD box sets that were like in 12 by 12 packages.
Yep.
Because I think they thought those were albums.
Yeah.
So, and thankfully they didn't, because, obviously now the vinyl is worth more than whatever those CDs would have been. But it's always been that way. And
now, do you listen to vinyl or not vinyl, but do you listen to albums from reel to reel or cassette at home? Or do you listen to the vinyl?
I usually listen to vinyl. I mean, I have a lot of my dad's old reels, and the amazing thing is they still play, and they still sound pretty good. And I do things like, I love to find reel-to-reel tapes where somebody just taped off the air, so you can get all the old commercials and things. So that, I will have. And I'm a real nerd about having all the obsolete formats, so I have many boom boxes around, and I still have my Nakamichi cassette deck, which, at that point was the top deck to have.
Yep.
But the only time I'm playing cassettes is when it's something on there that maybe needs to be transferred to digital or that I don't have any other way.
Gotcha.
But I also have 8-track players, and
Well, that's a real interesting idea that your dad had. It was like, no, you save the vinyl, you tape it, you listen to it there.
Yeah.
Because you can always, you keep the vinyl in perfect condition, you can always retape it.
he was very, very adamant about vinyl care, much more than actually I am. But yeah, he would do that. In fact, speaking of 8-track, at some point as a kid, we got a brand new Buick station wagon, and it had an 8-track player in it, and that's the first car we'd ever had with a tape player in it. I was so excited. I thought, man, we need to get some 8-tracks. And my dad just refused on principle because it's an inferior format. I hate it. So eventually we talked him into, he compromised and said, okay, we can each get a tape. My mom, myself, and him. So he bought Willie Nelson's Phases and Stages. Mm-hmm. I got some K-Tel compilation, and my mom got the Best of Bread. And those were the only 3 tapes we had in our car.
Wow.
So to this day, I can sing Phases and Stages or Best of Bread back to front.
That's awesome.
And actually, much, much later, I couldn't listen to Faces and Stages for a long time because I'd heard it so much.
I believe that.
But then when I re-listened to it, I realized that's a great album. It's a concept album. One side is his side, one side is her side. It's about divorce. And, as a kid, I, of course, wasn't going to get that. But just a brilliant album. I love to listen to it now.
The first time I got to tour in Europe, we really didn't think about the fact that we would be driving a lot, because this is before streaming from a phone. I think we had iPods, but I don't know if cars had aux jacks on the regular. So we get over there, and it's like a short 3-week tour. We're doing shows in Germany, Austria, and Italy. And it's just me and a buddy. And I'm playing solo shows. He's selling merch and taking money and all that sort of stuff. And so we realized we have nothing to listen to. And the radio, their radio stations, at least at the time, were so varied. Where it was like, oh, I found a Bob Seger song. Cool, this must be a good station. And then they'd
play
be like
a Bach piece after that.
Exactly, yeah. And then like an opera. And you're like, well, I don't want to listen to this. Like, give me more of the Bob Seger. So we go to one of the auto grills, one of the rest stops.
Right.
And the only 2 American things we could find was the best of Stevie Wonder and the best of Bruce Springsteen. Can't believe I'm going to say this on the East Nashville podcast. Springsteen doesn't really do it for me.
Oh, dude.
And I'm saying that while wearing a John Latham shirt.
That's right.
It's really big trouble. I'm getting myself
the knives come out. Yeah.
Well, he's not. Be clear, I'm not saying he's bad or anything like that. It's just I can listen to about 3 songs, and I'm like, all right, that's enough Springsteen. So basically, and my buddy felt the same way. So we end up just listening to this Stevie Wonder record over and over and over again for 3 weeks. I had to take a break for Stevie Wonder after that. But it was so much fun. It was so much fun just kind of catching ourselves like, oh yeah, we've been driving for 6 hours. This is probably the 7th time this CD is played.
So you're still not into Bruce, is that right?
I really like the Nebraska album.
Okay.
And
because I got to tell you, I moved here from New Jersey. We lived in New Jersey for 7 years while we were up there. And if we weren't into Springsteen before that...
Yeah, that'll do it.
Well, it was just... it was omnipresent. I mean...
Yeah. That and Bon Jovi, right?
Well, much lesser Bon Jovi. Bon Jovi was the little kid to Bruce's adult. I mean, we got to see whenever At that point, when Bruce wasn't touring, he would do a big Christmas show in Asbury Park.
Yeah.
And the band would be kind of half E Street, half of Southside Johnny's band with a gospel choir. It was just off the hook.
Yeah.
Amazing. And John Bon Jovi would show up, but he was relegated to singing background vocals.
Wow.
It was always like they kind of kept him in his place kind of thing. Even though,
hazed John Bon Jovi?
yeah, even though he's selling, bazillions of albums, it's
Yeah.
like, in our house, you're the background singer.
Yeah. That's wild.
But he would pop up and do shows and clubs all around, and even his daughter is an equestrian and now has competed in the Olympics. But at that point, she was just a young girl in kind of the horse competition scene, and our daughter Elena was also an equestrian, and occasionally you'd see Bruce and Patty out at the horse things. So yeah.
I think I was always a little bit more into heavy rock when I was a kid.
Have you ever seen Bruce live?
I have.
Okay.
He headlined a Bonnaroo that I was at. And he played something like a 2.5 hour set at Bonnaroo.
Right.
And it was pretty incredible. It was.
Okay. All right.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I don't respect the man.
All right, John, go easy on it.
It's, John Latham, if he ever sees this, I'm going to be in big trouble. But, yeah, I think for me, the stuff that really grabbed me as a kid was Van Halen, Nirvana, all the stuff where, even before I played guitar, all the stuff where the guitar just had this larger-than-life sound.
Yeah. Well, I was a big Van Halen fan, and funnily enough, I went to school in Shreveport, Louisiana, a small liberal arts college called Centenary College, and that just happened to be Valerie Bertinelli's hometown. And I was actually at the show where Valerie and Eddie met.
Whoa.
Because she has posted pictures of that, and I was at that show. And then in years after that, of course, they got married pretty soon after they met. He would come and just play with bar bands in Shreveport. And it got to the point where, Eddie's here again,
Imagine that.
But yeah, I've always loved guitar. But my tastes were always just completely all over the map. And and that's why, at $2 Tuesday, we always do themes.
Yeah.
And because I like to do different stuff. I don't want to only be the funk DJ. I don't want to only be the rock DJ or the country DJ. I think, there's good music and bad music, like Count Basie said. So, let's do the good music.
Yeah.
Of all types.
Now, when do you start? So Tuesday's coming up. When do you start planning, and how long does that take?
It varies. Lately I've kind of carried over some themes because like I was doing instrumentals, and the thing is there's just so many of them. I mean, we average on a week maybe playing between 20 and 25 songs.
Yeah. That seems about
And
right.
I'll have like 4, 5, 6 more times that to play because I don't plan out exactly what I'm going to play. I mean, I've got to play from what I bring, obviously, whatever's in the box, but I don't have any order laid out. I might think about what the first song should be, but after that, I think it should be intuitive, and you should be kind of paying attention to what the crowd is into and just what, I kind of feel like it's like if you build it, they will come. If you bring those in the box, the order will start to appear to you as you're doing it.
It'll reveal itself to
I don't want to sound too cosmic, but it does. And as far as when I start planning, it's kind of all over the map. I've got things that I've had in mind for a while, and then things that I'll be putting together. And I'm always buying records. Much to Polly's chagrin, I'm always getting records. So, I may get something. It's like, I need to do something around that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a great joy to be able to play records in this setting because, especially with the 5-spot audience, they are so open.
Yeah.
I don't go there and play the hits. I very rarely will play hits. I mean, I'm trying to play things maybe that you haven't heard or haven't heard in a while.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, I love it when somebody comes up. Like one time I played the Meters, and a very young person comes up and says, "Who is that?" And it's like, man, that's great. You just found out the Meters, and you've got this whole catalog that you can dive into now. And or somebody comes up, God, I hadn't heard that song in forever. I love that song.
Yeah.
So it's that connection with people. And the Five Spot Audience is always so open and willing to listen to stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes, especially lately when we start getting people who are not part of the Five Spot crowd. And there was one week where I know Derek kind of nudged me and says, "Oh gosh, I think they just got off the Pedal Tavern." So, but most people, will go with the flow and listen and enjoy. So, it's good. But, I can't tell you exactly when I start planning each one because it's different every week.
It's kind of just in the back of your mind.
Of course, there's only 3 more to go, so I should give it some
crazy.
more thought here, I guess.
The interesting thing about the whole streaming thing. So I'm 38. When I was getting into music, when I was becoming a young musician, it's from about 5th grade to when I graduated high school, which is 2002. Mm-hmm. So we barely had the internet. I mean, we didn't have a computer with the internet until I was I want to say a junior in high school because I was already driving. So I didn't grow up in one of those houses where there was records around, where there was music playing. My dad likes music now, but when I was a kid, he liked the Beach Boys, he liked Frankie Valli. My mom liked Bad Company, she liked Queen, she liked Kiss.
All right, Mom.
Yeah, Mom had
Rockin'.
some good taste.
Yeah.
But we didn't, there wasn't a stereo in my house. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, we had a little CD boombox, and my mom would blare Whitney Houston when she would clean. And the Bodyguard soundtrack, oh my God. There's one I have memorized.
Okay.
Diagonally, even. But, when I got to school, when I got to Berkeley, all of a sudden you meet people who have grown up in these houses with music playing, who, across the hall from me was Philip Bailey Jr. Not even joking. So they had grown up not only in the culture, but in the business. So when somebody comes up to you at the Five Spot and says, "Who is this band?" And while 95% of the people at the Five Spot know, oh, that's the Meters, this one person who didn't know can now jump onto Spotify or Apple Music.
Oh, yeah.
And then learn about the Meters. And then they can learn about Booker T. And they can just follow that lineage because maybe it was Sissy Strut and it grooved really hard. And
It was Sissy Strut,
of course,
as a matter of
Sissy
fact.
Strut.
Which I kind of laughed because that's among musicians. That's,
Oh, yeah.
That's a cliche almost.
It's what are we going to play? Everyone knows Sissy Strut.
Yeah.
Let's go.
But yeah, it's just I try not to be snobbish about it because everybody comes in at some point. You know, nobody knows everything and everybody knows something. And with streaming, I mean, the great thing now, if you're a music fan, every decade's out there. You can go listen. I mean, I remember reading about the Velvet Underground for years before I actually heard them.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't buy it,
you don't have it.
And, it wasn't going to be played on the radio.
Yeah.
I didn't live near a college station or anything at that point. So, it took a while for me to learn. I still buy stuff because that's, I guess, because how I was raised. But I still buy stuff like on a review. I'll read something, go, oh, that sounds good. I'm going to get that without ever hearing it. And like I remember having to, I had to special order the Sex Pistols album from my little mom and pop store in this little town in Louisiana. And it was Harper's Record Shop. And Mrs. Harper looked at me and says, "Does your mom know you're ordering this?" And I lied and said, "Yeah, sure. Yeah, she's fine." But, it was much tougher to get that information.
Yeah.
And, I had only a few magazines I kind of trusted, especially Cream magazine. I would read that, and you know, if they said it was good, I would say, okay, I can take a chance on that. But you know, that lawn mowing money or whatever was hard earned. You had to make it count.
When I was a kid, my my mom bought me, I think it was a 10-year subscription to Guitar World, because it was like a year was $25, and then 2 years was like, you know, some really big discount rate, and it got to the point where I think 10 years was like $200, and my mom was just like, he seems to like this. Bam,
boom. Okay.
So that became my little Bible, was Guitar World magazine. That's how I got into John Scofield. That's how I got into all these kind of more heady players that would write columns.
Yeah. Well, in the years before that, I was a subscriber to Guitar Player.
Yeah.
And yeah, just hours I would stare at that. In fact, this past $2 Tuesday, when Billy Harvey played, he was playing an Electra Les Paul. Electra was a brand of guitars from St. Louis.
I didn't even notice.
And the thing about Electra is that they had a screw-off plate on the back where you plugged in the effects. So instead of having a fuzz or a tremolo pedal or whatever, you plugged it in the back of the guitar.
It's like a module.
And then they had, you know, there's like a series of, I think on his there were 4 mini switches. It varied from the different models, but you had switches where you could engage them.
Cool.
And I just remember thinking, how cool is that? I want that. And I could never talk my dad into getting that. Although he did loan me the money to get a Les Paul later. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Oh my God. When I wanted an electric guitar, my cousin had put all these ideas in my head about what an electric guitar might cost. And at the time, I'm in 4th grade begging for an electric guitar. I don't know anything about money, number one, never mind about what things might cost. So I remember telling my mom that I wanted a Fender Stratocaster and it might cost $5,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And of course,
You could get a custom shop. Sure, yeah.
and what we ended up getting was a made in Mexico Strat that I still play on stage to this day. It was $220 with an amp and a strap and a cable and all those sorts of things. And it's a great guitar. It's a great guitar. Wasn't $5,000.
Nope. And, you know, that's another good thing. If you're a musician now, you have so many more choices than there used to be. But yeah, my first electric guitar was a Univox High Flyer, which was basically a copy of the Mosrite Ventures type guitar. And it was okay. I mean, it was serviceable, but I, you know, upgraded to the Les Paul as soon as I could. Although, ironically, the Univox High Flyer is one of the guitars that Kurt Cobain played. So now those things have gone through the roof as far as, you know, they weren't great guitars, but, you know, they did the job.
Now, do you actively play?
I don't play a lot. You know, I should play more. In fact, I was playing a little bit today and realizing, oh gosh, I've gotten so creaky. But, you know, Nashville's a place where if you're not at least a moderate guitar player, you can be shamed very quickly. So
yeah, it's funny. I have this trio. I mean, I think you've seen us. Maybe
I've seen
once.
the trio, yes.
And it's such a funny feeling. Like when you book these shows, it seems like it's a good idea, and then as it gets closer, you realize I have a self-indulgent guitar trio in Guitar Town. Do I really want to do this? Do I really want to open myself up to that criticism?
The thing is, you got to be you know, because there's always somebody who's better, and there's many people who are worse, but mainly everybody's different.
Yeah.
And although I do, I think Derek kind of talked about this on the episode, you know, when bands come in to Nashville and, you know, they're like the hottest band from wherever they're from.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've seen them, you know, and they're playing the 5 spot, and I'm looking around the crowd, and I just wonder, they have no idea who's sitting in here right now.
Yeah.
You know, guys who are just monster players.
Yeah.
And women, you know, I don't want to be sexist on that, but yeah, it can be very humbling in this town.
Yeah. Without a doubt.
And, you know, that's one of the things throughout all those years at the 5 spot. It used to be every week, not so often now, but every week you would meet somebody who was saying either, I just moved here or I'm about to move to Nashville.
Yeah.
And, you'd want to say, great, we're glad to have you. And then you're also thinking, I hope you have a way to support yourself while you're here, and that you take the time to kind of, because, Nashville's the kind of place you don't get to jump the line most of the time. You have to find some like-minded people, and, if you are good, that's very important. If you've got the talent, then you can find your place. And, if you're a songwriter, you'll find some people to co-write with. If you're a guitar player, you'll, find places to play. But, it is, it's just a very high level of talent here.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, me and Derek were talking about that guy, Jesse Isley.
Oh, yeah,
who played a few weeks ago, and it was just like, I was saying to Adrian that night, from Adrian Meredith, I was saying, like, if we were anywhere else, this would be the biggest thing happening, because this band is just so good. So undeniably good. And people were not, it's not like they weren't enjoying it. It was just, it's the last band of the night. No one's really paying close attention. People are starting to funnel out as it gets late. And it's like, anywhere else, this band would be on the front page of the newspaper. They're so good.
We get spoiled.
Yeah.
And, the great thing about $2 Tuesday is that we've seen so many amazing bands come through. Margot Price and the Price Tags starting there. The Wild Feathers, All Them Witches, Twin.
Twin. Oh, man. Their new stuff is great.
Released an amazing record. I mean, just so many good bands. Illiterate Light. Yeah. And on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
Back in the days when Derek used to book 5 acts, I still can't believe. I mean, I'm sad that it's ending. Selfishly, I wish it could go on forever, but I really understand. I mean, he spends so much time doing this, and even though we're just doing 3 acts a week rather than 5, it's still a lot of work.
Yeah.
And but I'm so grateful for just all those years, and the people that would come in to $2 Tuesday. I'll never forget. I'm spinning records and someone taps me on the shoulder, and it's Robin Hitchcock, which is a guy I've loved forever. And he had just come to town. He said, "Oh, would you fancy spinning records for my gig at, the Mercy Lounge?" I go, "Well, I could do that."
Yeah, I'll do that.
But it's been just a wonderful place to be, a wonderful platform, and some place that I know at least one night a week I'm going to see a good show. Yeah. And probably somebody that's going to knock me out that I didn't even know before. So, that just happens so many times that it's been a real blessing. And, I'm eternally thankful to Derek for doing all that work. Because, I do my stuff, but basically I just show up, and...
I mean, you show up with cases of records, though.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. But,
you do some serious physical labor.
That's just, that's what, I do on my own. Yeah. And I will mention, for those folks out there, I do other things other than $2 Tuesday.
Of course.
If you need somebody for your wedding, your bar mitzvah, whatever, your party, give me a call.
And I mean, you've had radio shows. I think the first time you and I started talking more than just like, hey, that's a good set, or like, hey, I really like that song, was when you invited me to do the Vinyl Lunch. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we started getting to know each other. And that was a great show.
Well, thank you. No, I really enjoyed that. We did 3 years, over 800 episodes of that. Yeah. And quite honestly, I had people on there that I just can't believe would have come on there. I mean, one of my first guests was Dwayne Eddy, which was my dad's favorite. I mean, I still have his copies of those Dwayne Eddy records and was able to play them with Dwayne Eddy in the studio. So, that was a great forum because, you start talking to people about their favorite music, that really opens some doors, and it's not just the same old, so how's the tour and what's your new single? And, I was really, I really loved doing that.
Yeah, your Facebook is just, or Instagram or whatever is always just like, here's Tim with this humongous megastar. Here's Tim with this other humongous megastar. It's neat that you've had this storied career full of...
Well, if we'd all had phones in our pockets, in the 80s and 90s, I
Yeah.
would have more pictures. But, it used to be not cool. It used to
Yeah,
be,
yeah.
you wouldn't take the picture, unless there was a professional photographer there. And
Yeah,
I do regret not having more, but, that's our life now. We have to log it on Instagram. And actually, it's really good because I enjoy, seeing what my friends are doing in other parts of the world.
Absolutely.
And my nephew just played a cool gig in New Orleans, so it's good to keep up with him through that. So it's a good thing.
I have one last question for you. What do you think defines a really good DJ set? Like, what separates the men from the boys in composing a set?
Well, I'm different in that I'm not, I only play vinyl. So I don't have a digital controller, which, some guys do and do it very well.
Mm-hmm.
And they beat mix the record, so it's a very smooth transition, everything. I want to hear something intriguing. I want to, and sometimes I like juxtapositions that don't seem to make sense. Waylon Jennings into, well, what did I play the other night? Something like Dee Dee Ramone. Those don't seem to have anything to do with themselves on the surface. But yeah, a lot of times, especially with vinyl, I'll hear somebody, hey, I'm a vinyl DJ. It's like, cool. And you'll hear their set. And the next time you might hear them, it's pretty much the same set.
Yeah.
I think, if you're going to try to do that, great. But you got to have more than one set.
Yeah.
You really need more than 10 sets. You need to always be thinking. And that's why, I understand why some guys only do one type and be like, I'm only a funk DJ or I'm only this. But I like variety. I'm just that way.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, just, some thought beforehand, but then also just letting the moment take you where it's going to take you. Because if you plan out, I know some people who, they plan out the whole set before they go. And that just doesn't leave any room for the magic to happen, for the audience interaction or anything. So, that's what I'm looking for.
Absolutely. I grew up as an event DJ, just on CDs because that's what we had.
Sure. Yeah.
My best friend in high school, his uncle was a wedding DJ and an event DJ. And it was the coolest thing I ever heard. That wait, you get paid to just
play music,
play CDs for people, and so I went on instantly yeah, let me come with you. I want to be a part of this. And so at 13, I became his apprentice or something.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And which basically meant you're going to carry the big speakers, you're going to wrap and unwrap the cables, you're going to do all this horrible work, but I was 13 and hanging out at these big parties, which were sometimes they were frat parties, sometimes they were weddings, all this great stuff. And just learning how to talk to people and learning how to, he'd put me on the mic and he figured out I could do an impression of Butthead and he could do a good impression of Beavis. And so we'd do Beavis and Butthead and it was really cool. And it was always really neat, in those early years when I would see him, drop a song out of nowhere where you're like, oh, this is a crowd among this certain age. Mm-hmm. And you would think, oh, they want to hear the obvious stuff we're playing. And then, when you have a group of 16, 18, 20 something, and he would drop Love Shack and they would flip the hell out. And in my mind, I'm thinking, really? Love Shack? My mom likes that song. But some things are undeniable, right?
Music can be the great democratizer.
Yeah.
And I do love the crowd interaction. One of my favorite comments I ever had, I was DJing, I don't know exactly what the event was now. It might have been Record Store Day, but back at the former location of Grimey's when they used to do things in the parking lot, I was one of the DJs that day. And they had a lot of bands playing. It must have been Record Store Day. And then all of a sudden, from nowhere, up behind me, Ian McLaughlin, the late Ian McLaughlin of Faces and everything, pops up and he says, "Records!" the past and the future of the music business. And he just immediately dove in and started like picking out records to play, and just it's that enthusiasm. There's a guy who's done 1 million gigs, and yet, you know, he's still excited about records. So
Yeah. Well, that's perfect. Let's wrap it up there.
Okay.
I'm still excited about records. You're still excited about records.
Absolutely.
We have 3 more $2 Tuesday sets to go. I'm excited to hear them.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and you know, everybody, please come out. Don't wait till the last one.
That's right.
You know, we've got 3 of them, but yeah, that last one, we'll all fight back the tears. You know, it's
We're
like
all gonna cry. It's gonna be bad.
we'll be having our own wake.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
anyway, there you go. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah. Thank you for being here, Tim.
My pleasure.